Hi, I'm Femi OK. Internet service is slowly starting to trickle back into Indian-administered Kashmir, but a nearly 6-month communication blackout has already had a devastating impact on the people and economy. Have you been affected? Talk to us via our live YouTube chat or on Twitter, and you too could be in the stream. The 160-day internet ban in Kashmir affected hospitals, schools, businesses. 7 million of the region's residents couldn't contact relatives or pay their bills, let alone shop online or watch Netflix. India cut off the internet last August after revoking Kashmir's semi-autonomous status. Officials insist the blackout prevents unrest, but India's Supreme Court recently ruled that an indefinite suspension is impermissible under the Constitution. Since that ruling, India has whitelisted a few hundred websites for use in Kashmir, but internet remains frustratingly slow. Have a listen to this local resident.
I'm not happy with this since only 2G has been restored, and there are certain conditions that we have no access to the social networking sites. Only Google and other things have been kept open. So I think this is a shame to the government.
Our guests today join us to discuss the impact of the blackout on Kashmiris. First, we have Jazeera, a Kashmiri political anthropologist and poet based in Colorado. Also with us, Anuradha Bhasin, executive editor of the Kashmir Times. Anuradha is based in Jammu and is one of the people who successfully petitioned India's Supreme Court to remove the communication blockade. And finally, we have Akriti Bopana. She is a research fellow at the Vidhi Centre for Legal Policy in Bangalore, India. Akriti is also an expert in free speech and internet governance. Good to have you all with us, ladies. Nice to see you. Anuradha, this idea of removing the communication blockade, but now you have 2G. Explain to us how 2G helps you get around the internet in Jammu and Kashmir. What is it like?
It's like nothing because 2G is an obsolete technology and it's really not working very well. The BSNL is unable to, the main service provider, they're even unable to provide any kind of connectivity on the 2G. There's some service provider whose connectivity is a little better, but still it is extremely slow. So by the time you even open the sites and you're ordering something, it's already timed out.
Remind us, take us back to August 2019. Why was there a communication blockade in the first place?
That's probably for the government to explain. They've never even come out with the reasons of why there was a blockade in the first place, which is what the Supreme Court has also held while saying that the government cannot use arbitrary powers to shut down. And if they're doing so, they must bring it out in the public domain. They haven't brought it out. As far as I know, I mean, when you switch off you put information in the black hole and you keep people uninformed, you block all their communication channels. That's an indication that you're trying to hide something. So what was it that the government was trying to hide on August 4th and August 5th when it all started? It's been 6 months since, and there's still not the communication channels have not been properly restored as yet.
Sure. Atta, go ahead.
And then there's also this to consider, that research shows that when you're blocking communication channels, it really doesn't do anything for security. It is not creating security, but it's kind of done to hide what the government is doing, and that has been written about. And what we see in Kashmir, the kind of humanitarian crisis this communication lockdown has created, and that has been exacerbated. And with this 2G, it's almost like putting salt to the wounds of the people. And I think Arpita has written a piece on this very recently, and she can talk more about the research and data aspect of it.
Akriti, go ahead.
As you mentioned, the problem also is that when you have an information vacuum, you're actually adding to the rumor mongering that happens. Excuse me. So the information that anyway there's no way to get the information out, and then you're asking people to speculate on the information that could possibly be true or not. And
Akriti, take a pause for a moment. I'll let you cough, and then we'll use that moment so that I can actually bring in Syed Hamid Miraj. We've been really fortunate on this episode of The Stream because lots of people from Kashmir who happen to be outside of Kashmir are telling us about the impact that this internet blockade has had on them, and I'm kind of questioning why it's even taking place. Have a listen.
India proclaims to be the largest democracy in the world, but in reality, it's so afraid of the voice of people of Jammu and Kashmir reaching to the world that even after a 6-month-long ban on internet, it's still restoring it on 2G speed with all social media sites banned. I'm only able to upload this video because I'm not in Kashmir presently. As a Kashmiri, I often wonder, were India not a huge market, would the world community still be a mute spectator to India's oppression in Jammu and Kashmir?
Akriti, pick up where you left off. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that in such an information vacuum, like you're actually exacerbating the problem, like she said, because you encourage rumor mongering, you prevent responsible journalism, the kind of information that the government, and especially in a political scenario where the government came out and said that a lot of the people were in support for the revocation of Article 370, and when you enforce a blackout,
and then just so that we don't just drop article numbers in, just explain Article 370 very briefly. Go ahead.
Essentially, which gave Jammu and Kashmir its sort of independent identity tied to India, but it gave it special powers that allowed it to keep some of its essential aspects in terms of administration and sort of the political and administrative powers that the state government had, and they didn't have to conform to all the laws of the Indian territory like all the other states. So when that happened, the government said that a lot of the people in the area were for it, but there was no way of actually finding that out because there was an information vacuum, right? So it's sort of counterproductive to say that people are supporting when there's no way for them to voice out this so-called support.
And the point that Syed made, Atta, was that because India was such a powerful country, nobody is actually questioning what they're doing in terms of shutting down the internet, making the internet very slow, making it only accessible for certain sites.
And we also have to consider that this is not the first time that India has done this. This is more than 50% of the internet shutdowns that India is doing, 50% occur in Kashmir. And it's been doing this, it's been having these communication lockdowns every so often. And this has been the longest, and it's broken its own record. And it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't create, we also have to think about why is the shutdown happening? I do want to tell the whole community that we have to think of India not as a democracy, the bastion of democracy, but we have to think about India and Kashmir's relationship as a politics of democracy. It's a camouflage that has been created since 1947, that this is a democratic system. In reality, it's just an electoral democracy that they have created where they are telling people that the elections that are being held is democracy. But that's not the reality of Kashmir. Reality of Kashmir is a communication lockdown in all forms, shapes, and manners. When there was no internet, there were other forms of communication lockdowns. There were other laws that were suppressing people. And one of the sections which kind of bars congregation, which is called Article 144, Section 144, that has been in effect in Kashmir. There is Armed Forces Special Powers Act in Kashmir, which means no one can really speak, no four people can get together. If people are standing and sitting together, they can be disappeared, they can be killed, and no one can be held accountable. So that is the situation inside Kashmir. And on top of that, in the last 6 months, what we have seen is that they have taken the very heart of expression. They've taken internet, and India goes on to speak about development, and it goes on to speak about being an information technology bastion. But that's not what we see here. What we're seeing is repressing. What we're seeing is an Indian occupation repressing on a community, repressing on peoples, and telling them we're taking your autonomy and you cannot speak to the world about it. And that's what we're seeing being permeated over and over. And that's what Anuradha also has been, for the last 6 months. She's been fighting in the courts, trying to ask India, what is it that they are doing and achieving by having this communication lockdown, and also repressing on journalists so heavily. So we do have to see, and in my view, if you look at what the Supreme Court's judgment is, even though it was hailed by a lot of people, I really see it as, again, politics of democracy, that you're telling the government to review. It's not telling the government that despite making freedom of expression and internet a fundamental right, it's not telling them what it has done in the last 6 months as illegal, but it's telling them to go on reviewing it. And that's what the government is doing.
Right.
It's going into this process of review and review and review. And as a result, we have what we have in front of us, which is a 2G.
Atta, you make a really good point here. We are currently live on YouTube, so people are actually asking questions of you on YouTube. Let's go to Mariam. Mariam says, when is this problem going to be resolved? Anuradha, you've been taking this to the courts. When do you feel that there will be a resolution? You can't work with 2G for an internet connection.
Of course not. Of course not. Not 2G, not the 301 sites that they've given, because if it's a fundamental right, then it's a fundamental right that is equivalent to what citizens in the rest of India are enjoying. Why should there be a limit imposed in Kashmir? And I'd like to add to what Athar said. While I don't know when this is going to be resolved, because as of now, we only see very arbitrary decisions being taken, very ad hoc decisions being taken with respect to connectivity. You know, one day they decide to give 2D, the next day they stop it. One day they are, the sites are working, the next day they're not. It's a very erratic kind of connectivity. What I'd like to add is there's so much control on the lives of the people that Athar talked about. I pretty much agree. And I'll only like to add that it wasn't just on August 5th, it wasn't just internet that was banned. All forms of communication, including even the landline phones, not a single voice. So many people I spoke to, Kashmiri students who are studying or young Kashmiris who are working outside Kashmir, they could not reach out to their families. And there were almost people I spoke to, they were almost in tears. And, 15 days later or so that the government made some limited facilities for them to be able to speak to their families. These were just 1-minute calls, and they broke down on the phone talking, telling me about how humiliating it was that their parents had to walk 1 kilometer or 3 kilometers away and just speak to them and say and tell them, don't say anything on the phone. The kind of fear that had been, it had
engendered in people.
Yes, exactly.
I'm just going to interject just for a moment, because what I want to do is share some of the experiences of other Kashmiris who are trying to live their lives. This is not just about checking on and how your mum is doing, and it's not just about checking in on your favourite website. There is much more impact than we can ever imagine. Have a listen.
The internet blockades in Kashmir are a prime example of the collective punishment to the people who are asking for their right to have some basic fundamental rights. I could not wish my own sister on her marriage due to this blockade, as the great republic didn't want to show the people around the world its ugly face.
For a journalist, the situation couldn't be worse. We were not able to reach out to the people and the sources.
While in mainland India, dissent is aired freely, in Kashmir it's called a security risk. They don't want approximately 8 million Kashmiris to tell the world something they don't want you to know.
Akriti, what is happening in Kashmir region that maybe India wouldn't want the world to know about?
I think it's quite sad for the world's largest democracy to be enforcing such situations that are tantamount to sort of situations that we see in countries that are ruled in a more autocratic fashion, or by kind of more authoritarian regimes. And I think in a lot of ways, the situation in Kashmir has always been immensely political and militarized in that sense. But with the sort of more nationalist government that we're seeing, and the kind of change that we've been noticing over the past 4-5 years, what we've seen is that the sort of incoming government has lesser tolerance for dissent and for sort of for people to be voicing out their opinions, for the need of a government to give out information, for the need of a government to consult before taking such important decisions. And what we eventually are now witnessing are decisions that are taken at the highest echelon without any consultation, and just enforced regardless of how it affects on the grassroots, regardless of how the people who are actually affected by it feel about it, and by sort of saying that Kashmiris were happy about it and things like that, but not giving them the platform to speak. The government sort of trying to hide perhaps what at least some level of dissent that would have been taking place over the past 6 months, and now of course it's exacerbated by the past 6 months. So now the situation there is much more about just the revocation of Article 370. It's about how it was carried out, about how internet shutdowns in general are taking place, how now the Supreme Court has ruled internet as part of Article 19(1)(a), which is the right to freedom of speech and expression in India. So it's taking on a much bigger sort of form and conversation now than just the political situation in Kashmir.
So here's what India's Solicitor General had to say about the situation. And he says jihadi leaders can engage through the internet to spread hatred and conduct illegal activities. Blocking internet is justified to prevent such terror acts on the dark web. Preservation of public law and the rule of law has to be maintained at any cost. Who is chuckling? Anuradha, were you chuckling there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Of course, yes. This is the most absurd thing one can ever hear. You know, every time that they have to shut down anything, every time they want to deprive people of their rights, whether it is Kashmir or anywhere else, they'll start talking about terrorism. I mean, if there is terrorism, you don't take away people's fundamental rights. You don't deprive them of what they already have. And if there is terrorism, if indeed the terrorists are using this technology, for heaven's sake, you gear up your intelligence networks. You gear up your cyber security. You don't take away people's freedoms. I think that's the most undemocratic thing to do.
Let me share with you what Ashak, Atta, I'm coming to you in just a moment because I want to talk about your verse journal. But first, I want to go back to our YouTube live chat here. Ashak says, you block communication because you don't want the world to know what you are up to in the region. But this block did not work at all in India's favour because of the presence of international media. Atta, you have been journaling, using your poetry to tell people what is happening. Can you give us a little glimpse of what you've been saying, what you've been sharing with the world, and why you've been journaling at all?
So, my parents and my family is back there, and I wasn't able to get in touch with them. I think the first time I heard from them was in September. And I was also, being a political anthropologist, I was writing about the situation, but at the same time, I just didn't know how to cope with the day-to-day trauma of not knowing what's happening. And we know that there is a slow genocide happening inside Kashmir. There is a fear of settler colonialism that is looming large. And we know massacres that happen on a daily basis that have happened. There are calendars that are commemorating the massacres that have happened in each month. So as a Kashmiri who's lived that trauma, who's living that trauma, so I kind of started this verse journaling. These are small epigrammatic poems that highlight each day and versify the siege on a daily basis. That's what's been going on. It's called the Verse Journal of Siege of Kashmir. And in each day, I was trying to address something. I was trying to address a family member. I was trying to address something that had happened back home and that we came to know through international media. So these are short epigrammatic verses. One of them, this is just an excerpt. One of them reads, communication is cut, but our ties are strong. We hear war cries of a battle-ready people. This is because things were happening inside Kashmir, which international media was reporting, and the Indian government was saying everything is normal because they are depressed and curfewed everyone to death. The second one reads, the heart of Eid is sacrifice. In Kashmir, Eid is every day. And again, Eid was spent under siege. No one could wish each other. We didn't know what was happening back home. And then this is an addressal to my mother. Mother, in the wounded homeland, with its veins slashed, heart cut open, I reach you only in prayer. Mother, you can never say I do not call home. I have proof. And this program is a proof as well. Thank you.
It would be remiss of me not to mention VPNs. VPNs are very important. Have a look here. These are ways that you can connect even when your internet may well not be up and running at full strength. These are some of the VPNs that people in Kashmir are actually using. And online advice to other people. The Kashmir Survival Kit 2.0. And then you can see all of the suggestions there and how people are doing it. And this is what it looks like when you're trying to hack around the system. And this is, if you want to know how we get brief access of internet at a government-run facilitation in Kashmir, and then you can see how people were doing that. Anuradha,
yeah,
your internet connection is fantastic. Why? How is that possible? Explain.
Because I'm in the more privileged part of the state, Jammu. I'm in Jammu, which is a Hindu majority area, and 5 districts of Jammu region have better internet connectivity. The broadband, it's only partially impacted. The broadband facility is available, but the mobile internet connectivity was suspended all this while. Now they've restarted the 2G connectivity, which really doesn't work. But I'd like to talk a little more about the kind of media, the facilities that were provided for the media persons. You know, that little room called a media facilitation center, where about 4 or 5 or 6 computers at the most were kept there for use for over 100 journalists. And they were jostling for space, and you can actually see the images. They used to jostle for space. They used to stand in queues. Initially, when the phones were not working, so even just one phone call, the first time I heard my bureau chief speak was from that place on August 17th. And before that, I didn't know whether he was alive. How was he? And the kind of fear that I heard in his voice. After the media facilitation center started working, you know, your entire work continues to be under surveillance. Your work is under surveillance of the government, because the computers are the government-owned computers, and plus 20 other people are watching your work. You know, so you really cannot work freely. The other problem was that till end of October, the media center used to shut down at 9, and at 8:45 they used to start shoving out all the journalists. So we were virtually putting, when we restarted publishing our Srinagar edition mid-October, we were actually putting the paper to bed at 8:30, you know, unthinkable in any part of the world. So there are a lot of problems that media persons have faced. And the media facilitation center has added to a sense of intimidation.
I hear that, and I also, this Kamar is watching us and following on YouTube, and he puts in the YouTube chat, 2G, I'd rather have no connection at all. It's just more salt on Kashmiri's wounds, explaining how difficult it actually is to even connect, to use 2G in our modern websites that we have all around the world. I am just thinking, Anuradha, what do you think is going to be the next step? You have been trying to petition the courts to lift this ban. 2G is not really lifting the ban. What next?
Let's see, because every day they come out with something new. You know, they first came out with a list of 101 whitelisted sites. Now they've increased to 301. Then every week they say, you know, we're going to review, we're going to keep adding. So one needs to think of what next, because the court has said what it had to say. And on the basis of that court verdict, at least it laid down some very significant guidelines, in the sense that it said that upheld right to internet as a fundamental right, and it criticized the government for using arbitrary powers to curtail people's freedoms.
Right.
So, sorry. In that sense, I think it was a
So, Anuradha, we're right at the end of the show. When are you going to have 5G?
I hope soon.
Yeah.
We had... I wish the court had given it right away.
All right, so Anuradha, she's going to keep fighting the cough, and also fighting the internet block there as well. Akriti and Atta, thank you so much. That's our show for today. You'll see me always online. Thanks for watching. See you next time.